recurring bummer in my life is finding out that a brand that I thought was a small local business is actually owned by a crazy multinational conglomerate. Like Tom's of Maine is owned by Colgate-Palmolive of New York, and Tom isn't the only one who feels like the commercial equivalent of a catfish. Justin's Peanut Butter is owned by the same company that owns Skippy Peanut Butter and also Spam, and Annie's is owned by General Mills, and she always seemed like a specific Mills kind of lady, but apparently not. Both Ben and Jerry sold out to Unilever, and I know that everybody except for a few Supreme Court justices knows that corporations aren't people, but when they put first names on a product and then it turns out that's actually owned by the company that also owns Tresemme and Axe body spray, I do feel a little betrayed. And one of the worst is Burt's Bees. I mean, that can't be corporate, right? Look at this guy. Look at that beard. You can't wear that in a boardroom, right? Right? Ah, so close. It's actually owned by Clorox. But it gets weirder because before the sale to the bleach people, there was a real Burt and he had real bees, but he was forced out of the company, possibly over money, possibly because he had an affair with an employee. But either way, that whole company was a messy B word before Clorox cleaned house. It also sucks when a company is like positioning themselves as being against the big companies, like Dollar Shave Club was against the big shave clubs, I guess, and they're owned by, get this, Unilever. Seventh Generation is like the hippie feel-good version of cleaning products, and it's owned by, look, if you didn't already know it was Unilever, you're not paying attention yet. Kashi, the cereal that's not like the other girls in the cereal aisle, obviously I don't have to tell you that that's owned by Kellogg's. And you know the Choco Taco? It turns out Choco was a real guy who invented it, and then he was forced out of his, I'm just kidding, that's not true, but it is owned by Unilever. There are so many companies that seem like cute little brands that are actually owned by massive multinational conglomerates that I had to do a second video. Dave's Killer Bread, the bread with all the seeds in it, is owned by Wonder Bread, the bread with no food in it. I talked about Clorox last week and somehow forgot to mention that they own Hidden Valley Ranch, and I never thought it was a cute little ranch, but it's still surprising to learn they're owned by Bleach. See's Candy isn't owned by a cute old woman, it's owned by a terrifying old man. And Warren Buffett isn't just responsible for airport candy, he's also the queen of the dairy and the loomer of the fruit. But most importantly, he's the reason why you see 5,000 Geico ads. Pepperidge Farm isn't a cute little farm either, it's owned by Campbell's Soup. They also own Kettle Chips, Cape Cod Chips, and Late July Snacks, which all seem like alternatives to big brands but are actually just soup. When I was a kid, Pace Salsa had these ads about how horrible it would be if your company was headquartered in New York.
New York City!
Now they're also owned by Campbell's Soup from New Jersey. And if you love your local coffee chain, don't forget that Blue Bottle Coffee is owned by Nestle, the company that believes water is not a human right. Stumptown and Intelligentsia both still make pretty good coffee, but they are owned by the same company that also owns Keurig and Peet's, and they're owned by JAB Holdings. And while you may have heard of the other conglomerates I've mentioned, you probably haven't heard of Jab. They also own Dr. Pepper, Krispy Kreme, Panera Bread, and for some reason a huge percentage of the veterinary hospitals in the US. And if you're wondering when and where they got the money for it, 1940s and Germany. And I guess it's up for you to decide if that's better or worse than your parent company being funded by Bleach, Geico ads, or New Jersey. So I already talked a lot about brands that seem like cool little companies but are actually part of giant conglomerates, but another thing that happens is that companies seem like they're competitors but actually are owned by the same company. It's the illusion of choice. Illusion, Michael. If you're booking travel, one of the biggest websites is Expedia, even though it sounds like a version of Wikipedia exclusively for people you've broken up with. If you don't like them, you could always use Hotwire, Orbitz, Travelocity, Hotels.com, or Trivago, except all those companies are also owned by Expedia, which itself used to be owned by a company called IAC, but then it was spun off, meaning that Expedia is on IAC's Expedia. If you want reviews of travel stuff, you might go to TripAdvisor. Or if you don't like them, you could try Seat Guru, Booking Buddy, Jetsetter, Gate Guru, and Oyster. But you should know all of those are also owned by TripAdvisor. And get this, TripAdvisor was owned by Expedia until it was spun off, meaning they're a former IAC and they're an ex-Expedia. And you probably already know that Tinder, Match, OkCupid, Hinge, Plenty of Fish, Our Time, and other dating sites are all owned by Match Group. And guess where Match Group comes from? They were also spun off of IAC. Things are getting unhinged. Almost all grocery stores are owned by Kroger or Albertsons, and if you want to know what to make with your Krogertsons groceries, there's a lot of options. All Recipes, Food and Wine, Martha Stewart Living, Serious Eats, Simple Recipes. Guess what? Those are all owned by IAC. At this point, you're probably thinking, that makes me want to gouge my eyes out. But remember, your eyes are a subsidiary of IAC. That's what the I stands for. So the best you can do is unmatch and put them on your Expedia. Here are more companies that seem like competitors, but are actually owned by the same conglomerates. It's the illusion of choice. Illusion, Michael. Which is better, Hot Wheels or Matchbox? Doesn't matter. Mattel gets your money either way. They also don't care if you play with cars or dolls because they own most of the dolls, from Barbie and American Girl all the way down to Polly Pocket. But really, it feels like we're kind of in their pocket. Dior, Fendi, Givenchy, Givenchy, Louis Vuitton, and a bunch of others are all competing for the attention of the fashion world, but it doesn't matter who wins because they're all owned by LVMH. And you can tell you're going to be the top of the conglomerate period when it is a generic-sounding acronym. They also own a ton of perfumes and Sephora where they can sell it to you, and they own competing watch brands like Tag Heuer and Hublot, and then they own Tiffany's where they can sell those to you. And they probably celebrate rolling all those companies together with a champagne, which they also own. Almost all glasses you can buy are owned by a company called Luxottica, which sounds like that racing arcade game from the 90s, but they also own LensCrafters and the vision insurance company iMed, which will almost certainly refuse to pay for the glasses that they made that they sold you at the store that they own. And I know this makes it hard to sleep at night, but I hope you're not planning on doing that on a mattress, because in addition to conglomerating a lot of the mattress companies also bought all the mattress review companies. Casper actually sued a bunch of mattress reviewers for failing to disclose their financial relationships to mattress companies, and then they used the money from that settlement to buy mattress review companies. That is not a friendly ghost. That is some mafia shit. And you're probably wondering, aren't there antitrust laws? And that's a common misconception. There are laws, but they don't prevent monopolies. What they do is let you know that you can't trust anybody to stop them. More companies that seem like competitors but are actually just part of the same shady conglomerate. It's the illusion of choice. Illusion, Michael. If you drink a beverage, you're getting that sweet, sweet taste of corporate consolidation. If you like the hard stuff, Diageo owns most of it, including Johnnie Walker, Smirnoff, Bailey's, Crown Royal, Kettle One, Captain Morgan, and 90 other brands. So their customers and the protections against monopolies are both getting smashed. If you buy a beer, it's probably from AB InBev, and you can tell from that name that it's the result of a bunch of companies merging and re-merging, and this Belgian company still drapes its beer cans in American flags because it assumes you're dumb. To avoid their stranglehold in the market, you can always go with a craft brewery, unless it's Elysian, 10 Barrel, Goose Island, Golden Road, Breckenridge Brewery, Red Hook, or Widmer Brothers. They were all gobbled up by InBev, but then when they got bored, sold off to a cannabis company called Tilray Brands, because nothing says buy local microbrews like $1 billion going to the same Canadian weed conglomerate. Want something salty while you're drinking? Chips, perhaps? Pepsi owns almost all of them. Ruffles, Lay's, Doritos, Cheetos, Tostitos, and other things that probably also end in O's, all because Pepsi got bored making the 143rd best cola. Coke and Pepsi combined own 97% of the American soda market, and if you want to escape them, you can always make your own at home by getting a SodaStream, which is owned by Pepsi. I'm going to stick to water, at least as long as Nestle will let me, but whatever you're drinking, let's raise a glass to corporate consolidation, which drives down wages and drives up prices in a system that we cannot smash, so we get smashed. Cheers.